The following is a paid commercial program. Unless otherwise identified, the guests on the program are employees of or otherwise represent the advertiser. The opinions expressed therein are those of the advertiser and do not necessarily reflect the views and policies of Global News Radio 640 Toronto.
Good morning and welcome to Your Life, Your Money right here on Global News Radio 640 Toronto. I am Chris Creston, joined as always by Kelvin, the money guy. Who is Kelvin, the money guy? He is one of the top financial advisors in the country and just an all-around nice guy. Great guy to have on the radio, great guy to have in your corner when we're talking about finances. If you've got a financial advisor, you need a second opinion, give him a call. If you don't have a financial advisor and you want to check your own work and see if there's anything that you could be improving on, another great reason to give Kelvin a call. You can call him anytime, 416-457-7526. That's 416-457-PLAN, and you can visit his website, askkelvin.ca. That's askkelvin.ca. And later on in the show, I'll tell you how you can very quickly and easily schedule a call with Kelvin. Take all the guesswork of having to call him and leave an awkward message like you're trying to, pick up a girl in high school or something like that. You're not cold calling or anything. You schedule a call and you will be able to make an appointment with Kelvin to have a 30-minute chat just to go over whatever it is going on in your life and your money life, so that you can make sure that you are on the right track to make sure that you're financially sound, that your family's financially sound, and maybe you're financially sound for generations going forward. And that's something we're going to be talking about here as the topic for this week's show. Kelvin, how you doing?
Hey, Chris, good morning. Good. How are things with the kids?
Good. Yeah. You know what? It's an ever-changing world. And for my life, it's an ever-changing world too. My twins are now just over 2 weeks old. Wow. And it's sort of timely because today we're going to be talking a little bit about estate planning, which is something that I've sort of kept in the back of my mind, but you always sort of put it off. And it's one of those things you don't necessarily think about. I talked to a guy about life insurance. I talked to a guy about this and that and wills and this and that. I haven't actually put pen to paper. I don't have anything really going to protect these two little lives I just brought into the world and make sure that they're going to be financially sound going forward, let alone, myself. So that I think is an important thing. And I think it's something that we don't really talk about. When you're having beers with your buddies, you're not sitting down and having a conversation about what's your estate planning process. If you're having Pinot with the girlfriends, you're not going to sit down and talk about, well, how are you set up for the next generation? Like that's not something that comes up, right? Yeah. Somewhere in between chatting about sports and whatever happened on The Bachelorette, you're not going to discuss what's happening in your finances that way.
Well, we spend all of our time, actually all these shows that we talk about and other money shows, and we talk about saving money, planning our retirement, RSPs, growth in our money, all these things that we do. And what happens if we die? Like all the sacrifice that we made, these investments, all the markets up and down, anxieties. And we rarely give any thought about how do we transfer our wealth to the next generation? How do we protect a lot of money from the government? Mm-hmm. Not that we don't want to pay our fair share, but sometimes if we do a little bit of planning, we can save some money. It's often assumed that wealthy Canadians have it all figured out when passing money from one generation to the next, right? All these bank towers, well, they were filled with people, specialists, doing everything they could to maximize the amount of money that we keep out of the government's hand, It's funny, RBC did a survey and they found that most high net worth Canadians are not prepared or unprepared, I should say, to transfer their inheritance.
Really?
They say that 1 in 4 have a full plan in place. That's 1 in 4. Wow. And that's a lot of money, a lot of taxes changing hands. And I think if we rarely sit down and do this, we never talk about it. In fact, I talk about it sometimes with clients, and then they leave it on the wayside because it's something we don't want to talk about it because it's associated with dying, right?
Right. And it's something I think we're sort of a death denying culture. We don't want to think about it, we don't want to talk about it, it can be depressing. But there's a way to make it a little less depressing, and that would be to make sure that you've got everything set up and
Mhm.
you've got your ducks in a row. And what's the
Right.
old idiom about the only constants in life being death and taxes? And
Right.
that's really what you have to deal with. And you have no choice. You're going to have to deal with death and taxes. And when you die, someone's going to have to pay some taxes, and you got to
Right.
figure all that out.
And although half of net worth high net worth family tend to pass on all their wealth to their heirs, a lot of them are not prepared to do that. So they don't do any pre-planning. I guess it's because what happens is we get caught up in our, you're a business owner, you get caught up in your business, trying to make more money, how to do things more efficient. And we give little time to how do we keep our money and not give a lot of it to the tax man. So I thought I'd come up with a few strategies. There's lots of them, but I thought I would get maybe six important ones. Not they're all important, but these I think are all the most important ones that we should do. And the first one is a family trust. So
So
what
what's that?
is it? Exactly.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
I can think of a family trust. I'm thinking of a wealthy family, and I've heard of trust funds and things like that. What is a family trust?
So the ordinary guy, person, people can set it up. It's a trusts are a key pillar to estate planning. What it does, it allows the older generation to dictate how much money will be passed on to whom and when. So unlike a will we'll get to down the road, but a family trust we don't talk about. People really don't talk about it. So the trust also avoids probate taxes. So unlike a will, which becomes a public document, a family trust allows a family's wealth to remain secret.
Hmm.
This is one thing, and it also helps the family to prevent legal battles between the heirs. So these are things for really, really wealthy people that have lots and lots and lots of money that don't want the public to know what they have and so on, which is okay. But it also applies to the common people like us. There's a lot of costs and stuff involved. So before you get into the family trust, you need to realize, what are the costs and so on. So really all the trust is, it's a streamlined process of transferring an estate after you die. Really, that's all it is. So
Hmm.
it's like a will, but a little bit more stuff that goes into it, for lack of a better word. So people that have, if you have an advisor, give them a call and reach out to them and see, are you a candidate for a family trust? Can you afford it? That kind of stuff. Because we don't talk about it too much. Because when we think of family trust, we think of, oh my gosh, like people like Rogers and these all the wealthy families in Canada.
Hmm.
And that's how they pass on their money. But I think it applies also to us, to the regular guy, you know. So
Yeah,
it's
and that's
really,
the thing. And I think that we sort of rule out some of these things. We get these connotations in our head, like this is like for some like fancy media baron, like you say, like the Rogers family or something like
right.
that. And then you think, well, that's nothing that I could do. But there's ways that you can work it out so that, and if you can avoid taxes and make sure that the money that you've earned is going to your family, then that's great. There's no stone should be left unturned in that project to make sure that your family
And
is set up.
and the trust is more of a more efficient way to give money to the next generation, to your kids or whoever, uh, because it avoids a lot of things like probate. And sometimes when your money gets caught up in probate, especially now with the COVID, it used to take about 3 months to go through the courts and all that stuff. Now I heard it takes about 8 months, 8 to 9 months.
Wow.
So if your money is being probated, you got to wait. So if you have to pay funeral costs and things like that, well, you're going to have to take it out of your own pocket. What if you don't? So the family trust has a lot of, although it costs more, it has a lot of benefits to it. So people should reach out to their advisor and find out if that's something they should do, or give me a call or go on my website and ask the questions, and we can see if we can help you there. So that's an important one. Um, and it's a little bit complicated. The very easy one for all of us, and you talked about it when you said insurance.
Hmm.
Life insurance, we associate it with death, right?
Right.
But life insurance is really, I would say for living people, because what happens is it's the most effective way to transfer the estate to your next generation. It handles a lot of things like capital gain, like it'll pay for a lot of things like capital gains tax and so on. Life insurance is the only thing that's not taxable upon death. So the government hasn't messed around with that yet. But maybe it's coming. We don't know, right? Everything's on the table because of the pandemic. So the one thing about life insurance is it's if they change the rule, it's you're grandfathered, so they can't go backwards. They can only go forward as of that day, right? And in some of the things they call life insurance really love insurance because you're buying it for somebody that you love, right? So it's a really daunting thing. So if you have a cottage, right, or rental properties, a lot of people over the last 5 to 10 years bought, condos and things like that. Well, what they don't realize is one day you're going to have to pay the capital gains tax. So if you bought a house or a condo or a rental property back in, I don't know, 5 years ago for $500,000, it's probably $1 million. So that 500,000 is subject to tax whenever you may sell it. So what you want to do is figure out what's your tax liability in the future and maybe buy a life insurance today to cover the taxes down the road. So for example, you have a $500,000 capital gains tax, you're going to pay about $200,000 in tax, right, on that. So what you do is you buy a $200,000 life insurance. So when you die, your kids or whoever pays the capital gains tax, but then the insurance gives you back the $200,000, so you're squared up. The proceeds from a life insurance policy are tax-free. So you could build up your wealth inside an insurance policy so that it minimizes or eliminates, in some cases, all the taxes that you may have to pay. So it's a very powerful tool. In fact, life insurance, or insurance, I should say, is one of the pillars of financial planning. Yet many of us in the financial industry, we talk about RSPs and TFSAs and that kind of stuff. And I think we don't really talk about insurance as a tax planning tool ever, I don't think, and because the population is getting older, and if you're in your 60s and you own a cottage and so on, and maybe after the break, maybe I'll go into that a little bit more.
Great. And I think that that's important because there's so many people who do own a second property, whether it is an investment property like a condo or something like that, or a cottage that, obviously there's an interest in keeping it in the family or maybe selling it so that you can spread that money amongst your children. There's a lot that goes into that, and someone's going to have to pay the taxes on that. And insurance as a tax planning principle is something that you said not a lot of people are thinking about, and that's what sets Kelvin apart as one of the top financial advisors in the country. He's thinking about a lot of things that not everybody is thinking about, and he can bring that to your financial plan. And you can set up a call with Kelvin at askkelvin.ca. I'll go into the details on that a little bit later. That's askkelvin.ca. Stay tuned to Global News Radio 640 Toronto.
You are listening to a paid commercial program. Unless otherwise identified, the guests on the program are employees of or otherwise represent the advertiser. The opinions expressed therein are those of the advertiser and do not necessarily reflect the views and policies of Global News Radio 640 Toronto.
And welcome back to Your Life, Your Money right here on Global News Radio 640 Toronto. I am Chris Creston, joined as always by Kelvin, the money guy. You can visit his website, askkelvin.ca. That's askkelvin.ca. And today we've been talking about estate planning and planning for the next generation, planning for how you're going to be able to transfer the money that you've earned in your life to the next generation. Something I'm thinking about a lot is I've got 2-week-old twins crying probably in the background. If you haven't heard them yet, you will hear them by the end of the show. I can promise you that. But as we're talking about it, Kelvin, you've talked before about how it's not just you've got a team of people, and we've got a member of your team right here on the show right now.
Yeah, like I say, I only know what I know. And the things I don't know, because people ask me questions, I go and seek the advice. And at Card here, we have a lot of experienced people, knowledgeable, that know everything, a lot of things about what they know. So I rely on their help to help me, to help others to do what they need to do more efficiently. So it's funny that we're talking about insurance, because I have here our National Director of Advanced Planning for Card. And George, well, George, you tell us what you do.
Yeah, so no, we work together working on these kind of opportunities where we're looking at estate planning and when we talk about estate planning and insurance, it's really not that complicated. At the end of the day, when you die, the government is going to tax your entire net worth, everything you own, from your house to your RSPs to any investments you have. So, if you do nothing, when you die, you will owe tax, period. So your choice is do nothing, pay those taxes out of your estate, or use insurance, which works out much, much more cost effective than doing nothing. And that's it. That's pretty much as simple as it is.
Talking to Kelvin, the money guy, of course, and the other voice you hear is George Ramos, the National Director of Advanced Planning for CART Financial. And George, talking about insurance, I think a lot of people find it a daunting subject. And, you start looking into it, you see the costs, and the upfront costs sort of scare you away from it, but you're saying it's much more financially sound to try and use it to cover those tax costs in the future. And do you think that people are sort of clouded, they can't see the forest for the trees when they're buying that kind of product?
Yeah, I think people get hung up as soon as they hear the word insurance.
Mm-hmm.
But if you separate that, if here's a metaphor I use. If I were to show you a building across the street, and this building is worth $1 million, but I could offer it to you for 100,000 or 50,000, would you buy it? I'm like, well, every day.
Done.
Well, and that's all you got to look at. If I can show you a proposal that say, look, you're going to owe $1 million when you die, but you could pay it off with 50,000. Does that make sense? That's it.
Sounds like a great deal.
Look at its insurance. Just look at the pure numbers. If the numbers make sense, then it's a good strategy.
I think, when we hear the word, like you said, insurance, we associate it with dying, and we don't associate it with saving money from the tax man. And I think, it's too bad it's not another word for insurance, because more people, I think, would do it. Because I think from my experience anyways, when we talk to people, oh, Kelvin, I want to talk about life insurance. It's a scam. We don't like it. People will rip us off and things like that.
Yeah.
But it's the exact opposite, right, George?
Exactly. A lot of the clients we work with have acquired some level of assets, and it doesn't have to be a huge number. But once you start to really think about, okay, what happens when I die? If you forget the insurance, just have that exercise. What happens when you die? What are the taxes you're going to owe? And you'd be surprised if once you have, let's say, $500,000 in an RSP, that gets taxed at half. That's $250,000 in tax right there, right? Not to mention anything else you've acquired. So if you do nothing, you're going to owe $250,000. But if you bought this joint policy, maybe it's only $10,000, $20,000 for the same $250,000.
And what's a joint policy? What is that? I heard about joint last to die. What is that?
Right. So a lot of people, when they do insurance, they put insurance on their own life. That's a traditional single life policy. When we're talking about for a state,
right,
the state taxes are only due when both the husband and the wife pass away. So we don't need a policy on individual lives. We need a policy that pays out when both husband and wife pass away.
When the last spouse
dies.
last
one dies. That's when the tax bill is due. That's when the insurance pays out. And the advantage to the mom and dad is that the policy is almost half the cost of an individual policy. So again, coming back to numbers, it's much, much more cost effective to do a joint policy.
Right.
And it's so interesting because I think that it's just another case where we're all guilty of being a little, penny wise but pound foolish, where we, look at all the little costs that we have in our lives and we don't think about how we can save big at the end of our life and save. And that's for not necessarily thinking about yourself. That's thinking about your kids.
And I think with this capital gains tax that they're thinking of raising to 75% of your marginal tax rate, I think it's really important for people that are listening to speak to their advisor or give us a call and kind of put pen to paper and have some plan that if it happens, maybe we want to do, and that leads me to my next topic, an estate freeze.
Mm-hmm.
So estate freeze is really, when we think about it again, like we think of family trust, we think about rich people, business owners, right? So business owners have like a $890,000 capital lifetime exemption or something like that. Maybe George, I'm glad you're here because you're more equipped to talk. I just know the basics of things, and maybe we want to keep it basic. But can you tell us estate freeze? Is that for the average guy too? Or?
Yeah, so estate freeze is great. It's a great concept. Everyone that has a business should be looking at this. So it does need to be an incorporated business for starters. And where it really fits is so imagine, a family, they've started a company years ago and they've done all right in the business. If they were to sell it now, it's worth $2-3 million. So it's not a huge company, but it sustains the family. Well, a $3 million company, when they pass away, is going to be taxed as if like a capital gain. So $3 million value started from nothing. That's $1.5 million of taxable growth. And at the top tax bracket, that's $750,000 in tax. So even that company is going to be hit with $700,000 in tax.
Wow.
Where this exemption comes in, it says, listen, the first $900,000 of growth will be tax-free. Okay. So if mom and dad own that company together, they start together, they each have an exemption. So now they have $1.8 million exemption, but it's a $3 million company. There's still another 1.2 of growth. So it's not going to do everything, but at least it eliminated some tax. So if they haven't used that exemption, that capital gains exemption, they should definitely use it. The estate freeze, though, takes another layer, just to jump in. The estate freeze goes another layer, says, once you take your exemptions, then bring your kids in to be shareholders. So we have more exemptions. We have the kids now with their exemptions. So that takes a little more planning, and we'd love to discuss further with you, but that's basically it. Yeah.
And that's the whole thing about this is that I just know what I know, investments, things like that. But when it comes to, like I say, we grow the investments and we do well, what happens to the taxes? And that's, I think, on a go forward, is going to be a bigger problem for most Canadians than the markets going up and down. I mean, there's like 30 years, and we notice every 10 years or so your money doubles, right? Mm-hmm. Here or there, we know the pandemic, Chris, we talked about all the markets and things like that. But this estate planning, I don't think we talk enough about it. And I don't think as advisors that we're knowledgeable enough to know the ins and outs. And that's why there's somebody like George who does really advanced planning. And when I talk about advanced planning, I don't mean it just for the super wealthy guy. It's more for everyone, right, George?
Agreed. Yeah. And, I mean, these days, anyone that's, had a reasonable job has acquired some assets. And, houses these days in Toronto start at $1 million.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You have
You're telling me. Yeah.
Exactly.
I just bought a house in Newmarket, and it costs, as much as you would expect a house in Toronto to cost. It's hugely expensive for so many families, and that's a big asset too.
Exactly. So there's the home. You have some RSPs, a few non-registered. Very quickly, you have some assets. Mm-hmm. So the point is, this estate planning applies for anyone with any level of assets.
And look how many people, that are older that have cottages they bought, I don't know, like 50 years ago, like 20 grand, man. And now they're worth, I don't know, a couple of million. Mm-hmm. That's a huge liability, right? And think of all the people we were talking earlier in the show before you joined us, George, that have condos, rentals, and they don't understand the tax liabilities about what's going to happen. It's nice to say it's growing in assets and all that kind of stuff. But what do I do today to prevent paying all that tax down the road? I mean, you can't pay zero tax, but you can minimize it. And I think that's the gist of what we're trying to say.
Well, and George, I think it's so important that you brought up also the family businesses, because so many of the listeners out there, so many of you are small business owners. You've got a family business. You'd love to be able to transfer it over to the next generation, but I've talked to people who say, well, I just can't do it because the cost of transferring it forward is it. So it becomes a generational thing where it just stops, and it can't be compounded. And you can't grow decade after decade, generation after generation, because you just don't. You've gotten yourself into a position where you can't afford to keep it in the family.
And it's funny you say that, because many business owners work in their business, not on their business. Mm-hmm. So, they make a lot of money, they do very, very well, but they have no idea about how to transfer the wealth to their kids or whoever they want to transfer it to. And I think that's where we as advisors, need to kind of maybe learn about it, or get somebody like George to sit down with the clients and figure out, maybe there's nothing you can do. Maybe you're doing all the right things. I have no idea. So I encourage people to go to the website or actually talk to your advisor, because that's the first place you should go. And if you don't have one, call us, give me a call. I can put you in touch with George, or we could sit down together as a team and try and figure out what's the best thing for you. Like, don't wait. The should have, could have people we always talk about. Man, I should have done that. I could have done that, and I didn't do it. And now what do I do? Right? So yeah. So I think it's important for people to sit down and again, like you and I talk about, Chris, do some planning for yourself, and look
Exactly.
into the future. Yeah.
Do some planning for yourself and for your family. And like you always say, another thing you talk about, Kelvin, is don't be a know-it-all, be a learn-it-all. And, this is proof positive right here. Kelvin's a guy who, isn't going to just sit back and say, yeah, I know this. He's got a team. He's got a guy. He's got George Ramos on his side. And when you've got a problem about insurance, you've got something you want to know more about, you can go to a guy like George. George, thank you so much for being part of the show here today.
Definitely. When people think, oh, estate planning, that's for the rich, and we have what that looks like. And the reality is everyone has some need to do some estate planning, right? Whether it's, even if you don't have kids, that might look like, involving a charity in your estate planning. You want whatever your plans are to be manifested when you die. Right. And that requires intention. Even something as simple as, is your will up to date? Does your will reflect your current financial situation? So those are the things you have to look at.
So, we covered 3 things already. I want to talk about 6 things. We covered the family trust. We covered the insurance and the estate planning. So after the break, we'll go through the other 3 things that we need to do to make sure our money transfers efficiently to our kids, our heirs, whoever you want it to go to.
Terrific. Thank you so much, George, for being part of the show. And don't forget, you can always visit Kelvin's website. That's askkelvin.ca. That's askkelvin.ca. More of your life, your money continuing here on Global News Radio, 640 Toronto.
You are listening to a paid commercial program. Unless otherwise identified, the guests on the program are employees of or otherwise represent the advertiser. The opinions expressed therein are those of the advertiser and do not necessarily reflect the views and policies of Global News Radio 640 Toronto.
Welcome back to Your Life, Your Money. I am Chris Creston, joined as always by Kelvin, the money guy. You can visit his website at askkelvin.ca. That's askkelvin.ca. And on that website, you've got a handy link in the top right-hand corner that says schedule a call. You click on that and you're able to schedule a complimentary call with Kelvin. You pick the time, you pick the date, and it's all set up. You don't have to worry about calling and leaving a message or anything like that. It's all set up. You set up the time. You say, I want to have a chat with Kelvin Wednesday at 1:30, and boom, you've got your call set up to chat with Kelvin about something that's going on in your life. Maybe it's estate planning. That's what we've been talking about this hour here on Your Life, Your Money. And we're lucky last segment to be joined by George Ramos, who is the National Director of Advanced Planning for CART Financial. And we were able to bend his arm to stick around till the end of the show to help us learn more about estate planning and how that can be part of your financial plan moving forward. And you can start preparing for a better life for your children, making sure that they have all those assets are hard earned by you in your life, and all that time you spend working and toiling for your family, you're able to pass it forward to them and not to the taxman.
So that leads us to the next one, the 4th one, which is an individual pension plan. And an IPP by acronym. You know how in our business we like RSP, like RSPs, RIFs, TF. So another acronym we should think about is IPP, individual pension plan. And when I think about this, I think about it as a super RSP. Like, it gives you so much tax advantages as a business owner to shelter money. Not that we don't want to pay taxes. It's our duty to pay taxes. We live in the best country in the world, and I think we have our rights, that we have our duty to pay. But sometimes there's things that we can do as business owners that we have no idea and nobody talks about it. So George, can you elaborate more on this IPP thing for us?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So for business owners, if you own your own company, incorporated, you should be looking at IPP instead of an RSP. It has a lot more power and flexibility. And, a lot of business owners out there, what they do is come tax time, they meet with their accountant and they say, oh, you made too much money. So there are companies like that. There are companies like that. And what they have to do is they try and bonus themselves down to get down to the $500,000 of net income so that they're in the small business tax rate. Okay. The problem with a bonus down strategy is a bonus is considered income and it's taxed fully. Where instead of taking that bonus, because they've already probably taken a salary, that bonus we put into this IPP. And now not only do you not pay tax in, it's a full write-off to the company.
And your RSPs, you can put 20% of your income minus pension adjustments, right? And that's a maximum of what for the RSP for last year RSP?
28,000 in that range.
Right. With an IPP, you could actually shelter more, can you?
So it's mathematically they try and make it look the same, but here's the difference. With an RSP, you have that 18% maximum per year.
Right.
But with the IPP, it says, look, now you're at this point, you're 55, let's say. Right. Well, you have 10 years to your retirement. What they're going to do is say, well, because you're starting this now and you have 10 years, we get to take 30 years of savings and do it in 10 years.
Really?
So we could accelerate your savings based on the time you didn't use an IPP.
Wow.
And is there a cost to set that up?
Minimal. So yes, there is a bit of a cost to set it up. It's a one-time cost. Imagine like setting up a trust, a few $1,000s.
Right.
And then we just administer it like we would any other investment plan.
So it's like everything else, you pay a little to save a lot.
Exactly.
Behind this? Yeah.
And there's other benefits with an IPP. For example, an RSP, when you turn 71, you have to turn it into a RIF.
Right.
With an IPP, you don't have to. In fact, if you don't need it, because maybe you have other income sources, maybe rental properties, other income, you could take your IPP and you could transfer it to your kids. It becomes their pension. Mm-hmm. That's unheard of with an RSP.
So my next point about this is joint ownership of assets, right? So a lot of clients say to me, in fact, just a couple of days ago, Kelvin, I got this cottage, $1 million, right? How can I join it with my daughter? I said, well, you would have to pretend that you sold it today and pay the capital gains tax and then join it with her. Or you can leave it alone in your name and buy a big life insurance and pay for it over the next 20 years because he's 60. It'll cost him about, when I did the costs, I think it's about $300,000, but he's going to save like 800. So I'm going to spend 3 to save 8. Is that a good thing? So can you tell us, George, about this joint ownership thing?
Yeah, I've had this a lot. Even my own parents have asked me about this because they own a few properties, and one property we have in Portugal, we put in joint names with the kids, with myself and my sister, and that's okay. But then they wanted to do their own home here, their principal residence. Definitely don't do that, because now it makes that second property for me and my sister who own our own homes.
Right.
So that's not a choice. The other thing too, aside from trying to save tax, as soon as you put someone on title, now they're open to their creditor. So should your daughter or son have any kind of creditor issues, loan issues, they can now attack your cottage or your home because it's in joint names with them. So sometimes a little good tax planning that you think has other negative repercussions.
Or if the daughter gets married.
Exactly. It becomes a marital. Kelvin, you're right. It becomes a marital asset, right? It's exactly right. So, a little tax planning you think you're doing might have unexpected consequences down the road.
Yeah, because we don't think about that. We don't think about, like my daughter, Brittany, man, she marries somebody and then that person, or Jordan marries someone, and what happens to the assets that they built, or my wife and I give to them, if I'm going to give them any, I don't know. But so yeah, things we don't think about, and that's why this shows your life, your money, because you work hard for your money, and like I say, we don't do any strategic planning about how we're going to pass all this wealth that we built to people, and we always think about business owners, but now I'm seeing with clients of mine that they own houses, they own things that they have, and And the tax liability, sometimes it's not going to be worth it to do it. I mean, before, a long time ago, we had that lifetime capital gains tax, right? The 500,000 wife and husband. So back then in our parents' days, it was easy because, not going to pay the tax, right? Nowadays, it's totally changed.
Yeah.
So, after the break, we'll maybe talk about the last one and maybe some little tidbits about estate planning. And yeah.
Whole lot more talking about estate planning with Kelvin, the money guy, and George Ramos here on Your Life, Your Money on Global News Radio, 640 Toronto. Don't forget, you can always visit Kelvin's website, askkelvin.ca. That's askkelvin.ca to set up an appointment to chat with Kelvin about anything in your money life. You want to talk to him about your RSPs and TFSAs. You want to talk to him about some of the things we've been talking about here today. Talk about an IPP. Talk about how to set up some of these programs so that you can better pass on the stuff that you've earned to your family so that they can be comfortable moving forward, and you can avoid some of the pitfalls that people make when they're doing it alone and when they're doing it sort of feeling around in the dark. You want to check your work. You want to double check what your money guy's been doing. askkelvin.ca. That's askkelvin.ca.
You are listening to a paid commercial program. Unless otherwise identified, the guests on the program are employees of or otherwise represent the advertiser. The opinions expressed therein are those of the advertiser and do not necessarily reflect the views and policies of Global News Radio 640 Toronto.
Welcome back to Your Life, Your Money here on Global News Radio 640 Toronto. I am Chris Cresson, joined as always by Kelvin, the money guy. Thank you so much for making us part of your Sunday morning. askkelvin.ca is his website. That's askkelvin.ca. You can go there, ask him a question, set up a call, find out more information about everything we've been talking about, listen to past shows, all that stuff. askkelvin.ca. askkelvin.ca. And Kelvin, this hour we've been talking about estate planning, and you've been setting up some points for the things that people should be looking at when they start thinking about the daunting topic of estate planning.
Well, what I think is there's 5 components of estate planning. There's probably more, but I think the 5 important ones are, a good estate plan is comprised of 5 elements, like everything else, So there's wills, trusts that we talked about, power of attorney, healthcare, or medical directives like, and beneficiary designation. So a will, and we'll get into that in the next segment there. A will is a legal binding document that directs who will receive your property and assets after you're dead, right? So it's important that people sit down and talk to their advisor or give me a call and go over these things, because you don't want to sit there and go, man, I wish we had done this before. So that leads me to the next topic. And many people in Canada don't have a will. It's really shocking how we do all these things and we rarely have a will. And I think one of the problem from my own experience with clients is that, well, who do we leave things to? Because Chris, your family is better than Christine's family, and hers is better than yours. So who am I going to leave my twins to? I don't know, man. Right?
Yeah. Before the twins came along, I just had to worry about who I was leaving my record collection to, and now I've got to worry about these lives.
I know. So, can you, George, tell us what's so important about a will?
Perfect. Yeah. So let's talk about what happens if you don't have a will.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Good.
So if you don't have a will, you would think it's pretty simple. Maybe if you have one heir, they would get that, but it doesn't even go directly to them. It still has to go through an executor who has to actually take your will or declare that there's going to be an estate to distribute. And is there anyone out there that has a claim on this estate? So they actually have to advertise your estate is up, all right? And there could be, a family member, a brother, a sister says, look, I have a claim. They said I was going to get the family car or the family Porsche. And now all of a sudden, you got to go to court. So a simple little, everything goes out. I have one son. It's going to go all to my son. But the brother gets involved. It happens all the time, right? So if you want to avoid that, having a legal document that says my son gets everything is it. It's not complicated.
And look at how many famous people, that you read about that die. and don't have a will. Like how do you,
Yeah,
can you?
yeah. Like you hear stories all the time, right? You probably heard about Prince. Prince, the musician, he died. He didn't have a will. He died obviously unexpectedly, so he probably didn't plan ahead. But regardless, not having a will, his estate, which you can imagine is quite a large estate, has been challenged. Has been in the court system for years and years.
And
right?
that was in the news of a few weeks ago or something,
Exactly.
if I remember, eh?
So there's people that want to benefit from that, that they probably need some income from that, right? Regardless of their level of wealth. They, now where do they get income? Their estate is tied up. They can't access it.
And think about some of the musicians, really, when you think of Elvis, right? His estate is worth more now, I think, than when he was alive. But so who gets all those royalties and so on? So you got to really think forward, eh? With and
it's easy to look at those and say, well, they should have done some planning based on that level. They can afford to do it. Don't get caught up on, well, a will's expensive. It's not an expensive proposition. If you have a simple estate, it's a simple document, right? And we could recommend you lawyers or someone to do it. It is a legal document after the end of it.
And you know what? It's not just the people like Elvis or Prince. You don't have to have Graceland in the family or anything like that. It's a matter of scale. The things that are important in your life are important to you and your family. And it would be a shame if some third party or interloper were able to come in and challenge your claim to something that your parents have, or the claim to your children for something that you have and that you've earned.
So, George, let me ask you, for me, I think life insurance is the most simplest and easiest way to transfer wealth to the next generation. It might cost, some in the beginning, but at the long run, you're better off. But we hear about trust and will.
Yeah.
And wills, right? Which, in your opinion, you think, like, is one better than the other, or it depends on the situation?
Well, they're not mutually exclusive, right? You can have a will, create a trust, right? Which is a testamentary trust, a trust created through the will. But, the question is, I would look at it and say, well, first off, a will is necessary. Let's just stop there. Got to have a will.
Okay.
Now, the trust, on the other hand, that's more of a conversation as to whether or not you need a trust, right? So the reason to have a trust is to put assets in a different ownership, owned by this trust. So you might want to do that. Maybe you have a child that can't manage their own expenses. They have some illness. Maybe you have, too large an estate. It's too complicated to be managed by your spouse or your kids. So you want someone to manage it. So there's different reasons to have a trust. So don't just jump into a trust because it sounds like a good idea. We really need to discuss, is it the right choice for you?
And like I say, it's, you sit down with your advisor and see what's better for you. Are you doing all these things? And if you're not doing it, talk to them and get it done. If you give us a call, George is our National Director of Advanced Planning, which sounds like a lot of things, but he breaks it down into simple little things like we always do on these shows. Don't complicate your life, make it very simple. And live your money life backwards and live your life forward. Go have fun, enjoy your life, and make sure you have enough to carry you through till you die. And more importantly, when you die, that all that hard work goes to your kids. It doesn't make a big pit stop at the CRA. It goes right to your kids or whoever you want it to go to. It doesn't matter, I guess. George, I don't know.
Well, that's exactly it. At the end of the day, you've worked hard for your life, for all of your assets. Why make the government your biggest beneficiary? That's it. They'll get their share eventually, right? But why just give them more than they need to? That's it.
Yeah, no, I'm glad we caught up with you, because a lot of things you've said, I kind of know the surface of it, but when you get really into the heart of it, you need the more in-depth thing. And maybe some people listening don't need all this stuff. I don't know, but give us a call your advisor, and be prepared for all these things, because I say the future looks bright for many of us in the markets and so on. Live a great life and plan your money life, and you'll be thankful for doing that.
Absolutely perfect. Thank you so much for making some time for us this morning, George. And Kelvin, the money guy, the guy that you tune into this time every Sunday morning right here on Your Life, Your Money. And thank you to the listeners for making us part of your Sunday morning. I hope that you learned something. I learned a lot. If you want to learn some more, reach out to Kelvin. You can always visit his website. That's askkelvin.ca. That's askkelvin.ca. Set up a call with him and go over your estate planning. And you know he's got a great team in his corner. And George Ramos is one of those guys. And thank you, George, for making some time for us here today. And thank you, Kelvin, for a lot of information here. And thanks to all the listeners. Stay tuned to Global News Radio, 640 Toronto.
The preceding was a paid commercial program. Unless otherwise identified, the guests on the program are employees of or otherwise represent the advertiser. The opinions expressed therein are those of the advertiser and do not necessarily reflect the views and policies of Global News Radio 640 Toronto.